Thanks for joining us here on BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones. Well, the nation's top advisor says you should not get a booster shot without approval first. Dr. Anthony Fauci making those comments today. This comes as the U.S. is still seeing high daily COVID cases. The Biden administration hoped to start administering COVID-19 booster shots to the general population this week, but vaccine advisors to the FDA only recommended an emergency use authorization of the Pfizer vaccine to people 65 and older and those at high risk of severe COVID-19. They didn't recommend a third dose for people 16 and older, citing a lack of data about the safety and efficacy of a third dose.
I don't think they made a mistake, but the one thing I think people need to realize that data are coming in literally on a daily and weekly basis.
And health officials say that data will likely result in more Americans rolling up their sleeves for a third time in the not too distant future.
The place that might still be somewhat questionable would be the very youngest individuals. Is the benefit risk needed there? But certainly I think there will be a decision in the coming weeks to extend boosters beyond the list that they approved on Friday.
President Biden's new vaccine requirement could impact tens of millions of Americans, and it's a move that is drawing criticism from some Republican leaders.
As we look forward, if this president has the ability to mandate vaccines, what powers do we not grant this president? What does he not have the ability to do?
Now, the state of Alabama has seen a decline in its population since the pandemic in 2020. According to the state's health officer, more people died last year in Alabama than were born. Dr. Scott Harris says he believes that's a first in the history of the state. Comedy legend Chris Rock is urging people to get vaccinated after he tested positive for COVID-19. Today on Twitter, he told his millions of followers, quote, "Trust me, you don't want this. Get vaccinated." Back in May, Rock told Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show that he received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Well, Rock is just the latest celebrity to announce that he has COVID. The list also includes Wendy Williams, and the pandemic isn't showing signs of letting up. Virologist and infectious disease expert Dr. Lane Rowling is back with us this Sunday to talk about the latest on COVID. Doc, good evening to you. You know, obviously this is something, like I said, isn't slowing down. So what do you think about FDA's recommendation to only offer the boosters to 65 and up and to those who've only received the Pfizer vaccination? Is that putting everyone at risk by delaying the shots?
Good evening, Brittany, and happy Sunday evening to the BNC staff. But to your question, absolutely not. We have to understand that, that we have a long way to go in this process. And like I said before you really have a good policy, you really have to understand the medicine science behind the vaccination programs, period, end of story. I've talked about this over many programs and I've said this and I'll repeat it again, is that the antibodies that neutralizing that are produced by the vaccine only last for 85 days. There's a reason why you have to get a booster shot. Some people are going to get 2 or 3 booster shots for the next 50 years. That is a fact because there is no long-term immunity to any coronavirus infection, in particular the SARS-CoV virus with all these new variants. Mm-hmm. The reality here is this, and that as we go through this process, the science will catch up with the medicine will catch up with the science. But right now, the bottom line is that everybody's still trying to figure it out, and that is a big controversy here. Here's a question for you. If you go ahead and you say people, you're going to get the vaccine, and you realize that even though people like Rock and other people have been vaccinated and still get a breakthrough infection, what does that tell you about the vaccine platform? Maybe they need to go back and change the vaccine platform to give people better confidence in it, where the science says, well, you get this vaccine, we can guarantee you're not going to get a breakthrough infection, and in particular, getting breakthrough infections to minorities and people that have disabilities and immunocompromised people. That is a very big issue, Brittany.
And Doc, when you talk about changing the vaccine platform, and I'm following you there, how long does it normally take for them to be able to say, okay, we put out this vaccine earlier this year, right? And then also, are they constantly doing the research to keep upping the vaccine as we go through this process? Is that how that works?
Well, that's how it's supposed to work. There's always an evolution. And that's why science is beautiful. You make a theory, hypothesis, and you prove it. The reality here is that we got this vaccine in a record time within a year. The vaccine has not even been out in a year, and we're making leaps and bounds. Not me, but people out there are saying how effective it is, how efficient it is, and the science does not back that. If that was the case, then we would not have any SARS-CoV virus infection if the platform was that good. What do I mean by that? You have to understand that this particular vaccine platform, I don't care if it's Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and all the other vaccine platforms out there, were off of the Wuhan strain from 2 years ago. What does the Wuhan strain vaccine platform made for that virus have anything to do with the Delta strain, the Mu strain, the Lambda strain, the Charlie 1-2 strain, and all the different variants that are coming down? It takes 3 to 10 years to make a vaccine that's been tried, true, effective effectiveness, understanding what the real world implication of the vaccine, what happens when you inject pregnant females, people that have disabilities, people that are immunocompromised, and then you study the results. And then you can say with a probability that this is a vaccine effectiveness that you're going to get in that particular population. In this vaccine, we haven't had that because the vaccine doesn't have that type of long-term study. We're doing still figuring it out as the vaccine's being rolled out, and that's a very, very dangerous road that we're going down.
And what about kids, Doc? Because we've been seeing, obviously, the kids spreading the virus across the school. What do you believe is the greatest risk in giving boosters to kids and teens? Dr. Fauci mentioned more data is needed. What would they need to determine if it's safe for children?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. They're going to have to do some significant research, Brittany. I'm telling you, when you start talking about injecting pediatric children, the American Pediatric Association came out a month ago and says by no means necessary that you should be injecting this children under 12 years of age with this vaccine because their study has not been done. Here's the reality. I like to use this. You take a 12-year-old kid that has cerebral palsy, congenital deformities, maybe they have congenital defects in the arms, mental handicapped also. And that person's being taken care of by their family members, changing diapers every day. You're going to go ahead and give some kid a vaccine that you have no proof that really shows long-term effect. And what happens if that person has an adverse effect? Who's going to be responsible for changing that kid's diaper, feeding that child, and taking care of this child for years? So when you start going down that type of road, you better make sure that your science and medicine is backed with the facts and not what I think, what I feel good. And you cannot be rushing science. Science takes time, years sometimes, to prove a theory.
Yeah. And Doc, switching gears a little bit, because we know a number of employers are going this route, with the religious exemption being a valid excuse for employees to opt out of getting vaccinated. Will this have an impact on getting closer to herd immunity? What do you think?
Absolutely correct. We're never going to get herd immunity because we're going to have a certain amount of the population that are going to be resistant to getting vaccines. Religious exemptions, people that are immunocompromised that cannot get the vaccine itself. That is why in the beginning of this whole the debate initially a year ago, we need to have a uniform policy. If we're going to have herd immunity at 90% where the population has active immunity based off of natural immunity itself, getting the infection, or getting the vaccine, we have to have a common goal. And with the vaccine, I think we're never going to make that. And especially when we start talking about having medical exemptions and also religious exemption, there's always going to be a population that's going to be resistant to that type of change. And the reality is that if one individual, a kid on an Indian reservation, a kid in a small town in rural Arkansas does not get that vaccine, or a kid in a rural village in Africa, that individual will be the source of the next pandemic. And this is why we have all these different variants out here, because we haven't had an effective game plan to try to conquer the virus all at one time.
Yeah. And just for those who don't know, Dr. Rowling, who they're considering getting the booster shot when they are able to do so, actually. Could you talk about why they aren't permitted to mix the vaccines, though, since the booster shot right now is Pfizer, the only one on that list?
Well, because each of these have a different platform. The company has a different preparatory way they made their vaccine. And when you start mixing vaccines like that, that have really no true, what I call virulent or effectiveness in the real world, then that's what happens. You can start creating these super mutations. So scientists already said in England that the problem that we're going to have with this is that when we're injecting folks with these vaccines that are already infected, that virus gets the opportunity to see that vaccine and mutate. And this is part of the mutation of viruses, is the natural selection to be able to survive. So you have to mutate and change so you can create a super virus. But back to your question on that, the reality, Brittany, is that we have a long ways to go. And when you start talking about injecting children, that's a whole different ball game because the consequences are significant. And the reality is that if we get past this, we have to have a holistic approach from everything from education to vaccines to treatment to long-term management, wearing masks, washing hands, and be as a community as a whole and not just as individuals.
Well, once that data starts rolling in, I'll be curious to see what happens next. Dr. Lane Rowland, we always appreciate you every Sunday. Well, the push continues for voting rights in America after the break. What federal lawmakers are doing next in hopes of getting more people a chance to cast their ballots. Stay with us. You're watching BNC Live. Welcome back to BNC Live. The trial against R&B singer R. Kelly will move forward this week. Kelly's defense team will begin presenting its case, but they are not expected to take as long as the prosecution. They rested their case Friday after nearly a month of testimony. Dozens of witnesses spoke against the singer, including more than 10 alleged victims. Also, letters, audio, and video recordings were presented as evidence. More students are now free from gunmen after they were kidnapped from a school in Nigeria. Today, the armed men released 10 students that were abducted back in July. This after the gunmen collected ransom 3 days ago. They'd held back the release of the 21 students who were kidnapped back in July. Assailants kidnapped at least 120 students from their hostels. Several students have been released since then. 2 wildfires burning in California have now reached an area where some of the world's largest and oldest trees are located. The KMP Complex wildfire is now burning in a small area of the iconic giant forest in Sequoia National Park. It includes Paradise and Colony fires that were caused by lightning earlier this month. It has burned more than 21,000 acres within the park's footprint. Sequoias only naturally grow across the western slopes of the southern Sierra Nevada mountain range. Before the wildfire, the sequoias face danger from drought and climate change,
which then further weakened the tree and potentially made it more susceptible to mortality from fire.
And right now, the base of the world's biggest tree, the General Sherman, is now wrapped in foil for protection. Sequoias that were killed during last year's Castle Fire could have ranged from hundreds to 3,000 years old. Well, climate change will be among the issues President Biden is expected to tackle this week. He plans to go before the United Nations to address climate change, the pandemic, and human rights abuses. Tuesday, the president will address the General Assembly to pitch for greater global partnership. Wednesday, he will hold a virtual COVID-19 summit, and on Friday, the president will meet with Pacific allies. The U.S. is taking steps to stop the flow of migrants at the Mexico border. Nearly a dozen Texas Department public safety vehicles lined up near the bridge in Del Rio, where thousands of migrants have set up camp. Law enforcement is also blocking the river where migrants crossed in Mexico to get to Texas. Many of them are Haitian refugees who have been trying to get into the U.S. for the last 3 weeks. American officials have started flying some of the people back to their homes. Border Patrol says it's working to offer some relief to the migrants.
We are bringing additional resources to assist with security, migrant care, transportation, and processing. We are providing food, water, portable toilets, towels. Emergency medical technicians are available for first aid. If someone needs medical care beyond what our EMTs can provide, we are working with the local medical facilities for additional care.
Also happening this week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is expected to present the Freedom to Vote Act to federal lawmakers. It's the latest version of a sweeping election reform bill to help eliminate voting restrictions. The bill is a compromised version of the For the People Act. For example, the mailing of ballots would no longer be automatic. Voters would have to request the forms. It also adds a voter ID provision and removes the measure to publicly finance campaigns. Now, this is the third voting rights bill being discussed on Capitol Hill. But even after scaling the legislation back, Republicans say they won't vote for the bill. Melanie Campbell with the Black Women's Roundtable Coalition has been on the front line of the fight to preserve the right to vote. She says she isn't sold on whether the Freedom to Vote Act will do that yet.
We hope they can find 10 Republicans who will vote for voting rights. But if they don't, we really demand that the party that won the black vote, the Black women's vote, make sure that they, and that's the Democrats, and that's factual, right? Do what they need to do.
And when we come back, we'll show you how a theater in North Carolina is saluting Black history now that Broadway is officially back. Stay with us. You're watching BNC. Welcome back to BNC Live. It is television's biggest night, folks, and at least 49 of the nominations at the Emmys are people of color. BNC's Anita Bennett has been following every step of the way leading up to the big show. Anita, good evening. We're all excited about this. We've been watching and waiting for some time. So what are some of the big things we can expect tonight?
Wow, there is a lot to look for. And as you said, this is TV's biggest night. One of the most closely watched things will be, does Michael K. Williams win an Emmy? He's been nominated 4 times before this year, so a total of 5 nominations, and he has never won. His performance in Lovecraft Country was so acclaimed, and there have been a lot of people calling for him to win. Wendell Pierce, who co-starred with him on The Wire, he posted on Twitter today that he would at least like to see Michael celebrated and a tribute. Jamie Foxx also came out over the weekend and said, it's Michael K. Williams' time. Some other things to look for. Lovecraft Country does have a total of 18 nominations. It's one of the most nominated shows. Yeah. And it's already won 2 Emmys last weekend at the Creative Arts Emmy Awards. That's where most of the guest star roles and the craft roles are, the awards are handed out. And last weekend, Courtney B. Vance won for Lovecraft Country for a guest role. Some of the other things to look for, MJ Rodriguez is the first transgender actress nominated in the Best Actress in a Drama Series category, but she does face some really tough competition. And honestly, the front runner in that category is Emma Corrin of The Crown. The Crown is one of the 2 most nominated shows, and it is expected to clean up. Something else to look for, Debbie Allen is getting a Governor's Award. That award, one is handed out each year to an individual or a company or an entity that has just had a tremendous impact on the TV industry. And this year, that is Debbie Allen. Brittany?
Yeah, well, Anita, talk about also the excitement. On Friday, Jimmy Marlowe had Cedric the Entertainer on his show. He's the host. People are super excited about him. But talk about the significance in having Ced as the host of this event.
You know, there are so many facets of this. Cedric is very popular. His show on CBS, The Neighborhood, it gets good ratings, and it does particularly well with the African American segment of the population. Cedric was tapped because he's popular, he's funny, he has a following. Last year, only 6.1 million people watched the Emmy Awards. That was a record low. It's not just the Emmys. All these award shows saw their ratings plummet during the pandemic, but the Emmys they're looking to Cedric. There's actually a lot of pressure on CBS and the Emmys and Cedric to bring up those ratings. Brittany?
Yeah, and Anita, you've been obviously covering this. You're following Big Hollywood for years, right? What is the most exciting thing that you've been able to see in your time covering the Emmys?
You know, I think over the years, so many more people of color get nominated, and that is really exciting. Yeah. You know, with streaming and cable, there's just been so many different types of shows opening up, and they've created a lot of opportunities to tell stories besides, you know, what we used to see on TV 15, 20 years ago. So that is really exciting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I know it has to be because so many people, even we were talking to one woman last night, Janisha, who's nominated for Outstanding Stunt Performer, and she's just saying, like, she said that this shows that representation matters, and be able to have that opportunity to be on that platform is exciting. But you mentioned this a moment ago, too. How is the pandemic actually affecting the awards?
Oof. I mean, the pandemic has just wreaked havoc on awards, especially in LA and New York. So I don't even know where to begin. Well, first of all, the Emmy nominations came out in July. And then in August, you know, we had the Delta variant, LA County. We were severely impacted here, and things have gotten better here, I should note. But now the Emmys, they are requiring proof of a COVID vaccination as well as a recent negative test just to attend. And the awards had been scheduled to take place inside the Microsoft Theater at LA Live. That's where the Emmys happen each year. And because of the Delta variant, they had to move the show outside the theater into a tent, an air-conditioned tent. And it will certainly be glamorous, but that means not as many people can attend. So for each nomination, they're now limited to 4 attendees. And when you think about a show like Lovecraft Country with 18 nominations, well, they can only have 4 attendees. So that was a huge factor. And just last year, the show was virtual. We all know the virtual award shows look terrible. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And also with the shows being virtual, it really hurt the economy, not just LA. New York hosts a lot of these shows, Las Vegas with the Billboard Awards, and Nashville as well with the Country Music Awards. So these awards generate a boatload of revenue. There was a study done here in LA County in 2015. The Grammys on average generated $82 million a year in revenue.
Wow.
And the Emmys about $43 million. So it's not, people think, oh, it's just Hollywood. It's not just Hollywood making money. It is the cities that host these shows from the tax revenue. It trickles all the way down to the hotels, the restaurants, the limo drivers, the valet parkers, all the reporters who attend. They've got to wear gowns, it's black tie, they've got to get their hair done, makeup done, a lot of them. So there's just a lot of money involved. And because of COVID, that money went away.
Wow. That's crazy. And, I mean, even though there's been a lot of changes, can we expect the usual glamour? We love to see them. You mentioned people in their nice dresses and all jazzy and stuff like that. Are we seeing that this year?
Well, the red carpet just opened a little over an hour and a half ago, and the glamour is there. Hollywood is bringing it. The stars are all glammed up, even though, they're going to be sitting in a tent for the next 3+ hours. Yeah, we can definitely expect the glamour. One thing about Hollywood is Hollywood brings it. The stylists have prepped these stars. The stars have their gowns on and expect a very glamorous night.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Of course, BNC's Anita Bennett taking us inside of the awards. Anita, thank you. And Broadway, opera, and live theater performances are back, folks. Many shows made their debut in cities across the country this week after being closed for COVID for more than a year. I Dream, the story of Martin Luther King Jr.'s journey, premiered this week in Charlotte. BNC's Janine Donaldson sat down with lead cast members to talk about their return to the big stage.
Have your tickets?
Intermission.
Working from home has become the new norm for millions of Americans, and experts say employers may face an uphill battle getting their workers to return to the office. In fact, some companies are getting really creative and going big to bring people back. BNC's Walter Moore shows us how.
Wilkins is also a color analyst for the Atlanta Hawks broadcasting games. Dominique Wilkins, the human highlight film, is our BNC King of the Hill, a remarkable human being. I've come across him a couple times at the games. Certainly a gentleman, and he was a phenomenal player.
And you spoke about him jumping out of the gym. Wilkins probably could have jumped over my head. That's what I was thinking.
Mine too. When I was a ball boy in Portland, I would just sit there in amazement, listening to the announcers and just watching all these guys come to town. Dominique, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, all the greats. And I'm like, wow, collecting cards, trying to memorize everything about them, and just, it's a memory I'll never forget.
Awesome. Thank you, James. Stay with us. Much more BNC Live after this break.
And then only 67 days until Thanksgiving.
Well, I'm excited about Thanksgiving. Yes. Halloween, we just talked about being scared. So speaking of that, movies, that scary movies included in this. The latest Marvel movie is on track to be the first film since the pandemic began to top $200 million in North American ticket sales. Here's David Daniel with the top 5 films from this weekend.
He's the devil.
The horror movie *Malignant* fell to 5th place, taking in $2.7 million. $3.5 million put *Candyman* in 4th place and boosted its domestic total to $53 million. *Cry Macho*, starring and directed by Clint Eastwood, debuted 3rd with $4.5 million. *Free Guy* stayed in 2nd place. The action comedy made $5 million for a domestic total of $109 million.
I'll buy you some time, just keep going.
A triple crown for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. $21.7 million gave the Marvel movie its 3rd straight weekend title and a domestic total of $177 million, close to passing Black Widow as the year's top-grossing film. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
And check this out, $1.2 million. That's how much somebody paid at an auction for the first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This appears to be a new world record for a printed work by a woman. The classic novel was only thought to sell for up to $300,000. Frankenstein was first published anonymously in 1818.
I feel like we have all the creepy stories today of Frankenstein, but that's a large sum of money.
I know. For that, and you said it, it's like almost Halloween. We're approaching, what, 47 days? So I'm not surprised to start seeing this stuff come out, but I'm actually surprised that people would pay that much for the book.
I'm surprised too, but it's the first book.
Yeah,
am
the
I
original.
Correct? The original book, so I can see it, but I'm not reading that either.
Yeah. Listen, we talk about collections and all that good stuff, like we were talking about with Rocky's gloves yesterday, and how people are paying more and more for these auctions. And I guess if they could figure out a way to be able to raise money or whatever it is, I guess it's a good piece also to put in a collection for like children, something for them to see and all those things.
That's true too. So I'm gonna start saving my notes back there, my weather notes. So when I get big like Oprah, then we're gonna bring it out and like, remember she wrote that on this piece of paper that it was 72 degrees.
Okay, exactly. You can be like, you know what? Millions, pay for that stuff because it goes to your kids.
Exactly. There we go. Generational wealth.
That's what I like. I like it. Britt said it by her thing when it comes out. All right, that's going to do it for us for this hour of BNC Live. But stay with us. Much more news, weather, and sports and entertainment coming up after this.
In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
And check this out, $1.2 million. That's how much somebody paid at an auction for the first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This appears to be a new world record for a printed work by a woman. The classic novel was only thought to sell for up to $300,000. Frankenstein was first published anonymously in 1818.
I feel like we have all the creepy stories today of Frankenstein, but that's a large sum of money.
I know. For that, and you said it, it's like almost Halloween. We're approaching, what, 47 days? So I'm not surprised to start seeing this stuff come out, but I'm actually surprised that people would pay that much for the book.
I'm surprised too, but it's the first book. Am
the
I correct?
original.
The original book, so I can see it, but I'm not reading that either.
Listen, we talk about collections and all that good stuff, like we were talking about with Rocky's gloves yesterday, and how people are paying more and more for these auctions. And I guess if they could figure out a way to be able to raise money or whatever it is, I guess it's a good piece also to put in a collection for like children, something for them to see and all those things.
That's true too. So I'm gonna start saving my notes back there, my weather notes. So when I get big like Oprah, then we're gonna bring it out and like, remember she wrote that on this piece of paper that it was 72 degrees.
Okay, exactly. You can be like, you know what? Millions, pay for that stuff because it goes to your kids.
Exactly. There we go. Generational wealth.
That's what I like. I like it. Britt said it by her thing when it comes out. All right, that's going to do it for us for this hour of BNC Live. But stay with us. Much more news, weather, and sports and entertainment coming up after this.